Welcome to another CHRO Conversation, hosted by the Center for Executive Succession at the Darla Moore School of Business. I'm your host, Anthony Nyberg, and today we are speaking with Craig Haydamack, Senior Vice President of Human Resources for Milliken & Company, one of the world's leading private innovation companies with more than 35 manufacturing plants around the world and more than 7,000 associates. Craig, thank you so much for joining us. It is really a treat to have you down here. You're always such a great guest, and students love having you here, and it's a great honor for us. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Great talent here. It's a great program and great partnership, so we're thrilled to continue to support the school and build this over time. So,
can you talk a little bit about what kind of some of the big strategic imperatives are that your company is facing right now?
That we're dealing with. There's a number of things. First one for us is we are have just actually gone through a CEO transition, which is a big moment for a company. We just announced that a few months ago, and we have our first new external CEO in 153 years of the company. So that's exciting. And really for us, we are a very diversified business. We have three major lines of business, as many as 18,000 different product variations. And so for us, we are looking to grow in a number of new markets and new areas. So we're looking at new geographies in Asia, we're looking at new spaces in South America, and we're also looking from an innovation standpoint, how can we continue to innovate in textiles and floor covering and offer new products that bring value to the customers and also have an environmental and social responsibility value as well. So
all of those things you listed sound like things to help the business do better going forward. None of those sound like HR things. So how does HR, or does HR help? And if so, how does it help with any of those topics?
In those spaces. HR plays a huge role in the strategic implementation of any of those strategies. I think that can be the biggest impact that HR can have on the business and the shareholders, is that ability to take the business strategies and then translate that into what the actual workforce implications are. So, for example, if we are going to make a move into a new country, we've got to think about the talent sources, the location, what's the leadership structure in that location, how do we transmit the company culture to a new area, payroll, incentives, all those different areas. And so when we think about any of those business strategies, if HR is really doing its job, it should be able to show, here's the talent plan or workforce plan that goes side by side with that business plan. And so HR's ability to go in and listen to the business, understand what the issues are, understand what the complexities they're facing in that strategy are, and then translate that to a skill, a hiring, a compensation, one of the HR practices, that translation skill is critical. And so for us, trying to develop that in our HR folks and trying to apply that effectively with our business partners is really key. So in a perfect world, we'd be able to see a business plan and a mirrored talent plan side by side with it that was meaningful, specific, data-driven, that our business leaders could really connect with.
So you described what you'd be going for in an ideal world. Mm-hmm. So what are the competencies for HR professionals that you want in that ideal world so that they can achieve the very outcomes you're saying you'd like? Yeah.
There's a couple things I think that you develop a really effective HR person in that space. Number one is you want your HR folks to really embrace learning the business. And that's more than just sort of reading the website and reading the product catalog, but you want them to go out and walk the halls in a factory, meet some customers, talk to the business managers, look at product demos. You want them to almost be like they were hired into the business, not just hired into HR. We recently just hired a new HR leader in Asia for Milliken, and she's done a neighborhood of 45 business interviews and trips to multiple countries, product reviews and business reviews in her first 3 months, so she can speak about the business as well as folks that have been there a long time. So that skill set of learning the business at the beginning and being conversant in it is the foundation. The second step, I think, in that process is that ability to do the business to workforce translation. And it's really that idea of being able to say, here's the business strategy, the HR person be able to ask questions about what's the details of that strategy, what does that look like, what does the team need to look like that's going to execute that, and then be able to identify, do we have to change incentives? Do we have to build a new office? Do we have to develop a leader? There's probably 15 or 20 different workforce implications that typically come out of any strategy change, and we need the HR people to be able to go in and diagnose those items. That ability to ask those questions and do that diagnosis is critical. And the third step then is, once you have that, is to be able to come back to the business leaders and say, here's the workforce implications that we're seeing, and here's specifically what the actions should be that are specific, measurable, relevant, time-bound, of what needs to be done to address those to enable the strategy. And it's almost like approaching HR at the same level a business leader or a CFO might approach it, in terms of that very data-driven, specific, measurable action. So that, building the knowledge of the business, being able to do the diagnosis and that piece, and then building out a specific recommendation, almost a project plan. I think if an HR person can do those three things, they're going to do really, really well and have a big impact.
So that's a pretty amazing list of things. So it's laid out three things that you want from your HR people if they're going to be really successful. Are you finding that it's easy to find people with all of these competencies, or is there a place in one of those areas that people are struggling more, or
in
you wish
spaces,
you had more of?
I think they all have potential to do that. I think a lot of it comes in when we bring somebody new in. Frankly, is the onboarding, development plan, and experience to get it done. That's the key. I don't think folks necessarily walk into their HR career being able to do that immediately, but working with the new HR person to have a very purposeful business development experience path to how do you learn about it, connecting with business managers, doing the tours, and being very, very purposeful in that, and really investing in it. That's number one. The second one then is literally from our standpoint is that list of diagnosis questions that you think about. And over time, at Milliken, we built up a little knowledge base of what are the kind of questions and issues that we face in different strategies. So every time we go through a different situation, we write down what we've learned and we've added to that knowledge base. And we literally at this point have a 23-page list of potential questions that you'd ask. And so nobody's going to know all of those, but the idea of capturing that knowledge and be able to giving it to a new HR person and kind of coaching them through to how to think about the diagnosis, that has been really helpful for us and allows us to sort of each generation of person translate that forward and help them get better and better at that. The other one is, I think it's very much a team sport. And so, when we go in to do an HR review session on something, it's not just, one person against 10 business leaders. Typically having a sort of an HR team, a facilitator, some note takers, and a couple of other HR members that can help ask questions and look at things together. And you get 3 or 4 people working on that diagnosis together, you're going to get a much better, more holistic work product than just one person. So the knowledge base and that collaboration is critical. And then there are 2 other skills that sound, I think, very simple, but we find are critical. One is we want folks that have a basic functionality sort of in basic analytics in Excel. And so the test we say to somebody is, if you can go in Excel and do a pivot table and customize it and do some graphs that are customized and go side by side with that, and you can develop that and present that and tell the story, that's sort of the level that you need to be on. We see folks that sometimes come in and they struggle where they don't have that basic or intermediate data analysis and delivery storytelling skill. And so even though they may have great ideas and ability, it actually blocks them getting those things out on paper and influencing management. So we've actually done some work to upgrade our Excel skills and data skills. And then the other one that is, I think it's basic but really is important and trips folks up, is basic project management and work structuring. So if you think about taking, for example, a business strategy and then doing the diagnosis of all the HR implications, then you have to be able to turn around and break it into certain measurable, clean pieces of work that people can go drive and be assigned to. And so that Excel basic analysis skill and that work breakdown structure skill and basic Gantt chart planning, we see when folks can add those 2 basic skills in with their HR experience and some of their development, then they've got the full toolbox to go out and really do something impactful. So it's doable. I think it's a lot about the HR leaders being purposeful and thoughtful in building those things out. So
it sounded like you touched on some very specific skills, and then at the beginning you were really talking about things like, it almost sounded like curiosity and ability to ask good questions and to learn.
That's a critical aspect to it. Is that you're right, that mindset. And you think about a new person joining your team. You want folks that have that, you say, resilience, curiosity, and they're sort of self-starters. They're going to go out and they're going to ask questions, and they're going to look and dig and read and ask questions and find their way through something. Versus sometimes you'll have a new hire that says, just tell me what to do. I'll follow your recipe exactly. We don't have recipes for everything, and we want folks that we want to be able to give them coaching and support, but we want them to be able to go out and be resourceful and find their way through it. And so, like when we interview somebody, we're going to ask questions about what is a big challenge that you faced and how'd you overcome it, how did you fight your way through it. That interview question is one of the most powerful ones, or indicators of success, is that somebody can really grind through something difficult and complicated and come out the other side, especially when they didn't know at the beginning what the end was going to look like. So
that one is really interesting to me because that is a fairly common interview question. Mm-hmm. But often we teach people to be come up with something that it wasn't really as big a challenge, or in some way kind of fake it. But it sounds like you're really interested in people that have the courage to share a genuine problem and actually talk through the process and the steps to get there.
That's
Am I hearing that right?
That's exactly right. And that honesty, first of all, the self-awareness to recognize when you went through a challenging period and share it, and that you learned from it, and then your honesty and confidence to share it and just say, I'm going to be myself and share the story, that's a huge indicator. And we've had some interviews where we spent 30, 45 minutes interviewing somebody on that one question. And what we do is we ask them follow-ups. So tell me about this, and how'd you overcome this, and what did that look like, and who did you present to, and how'd you face that? And so that one interview question turns into 10 follow-ups where you just kind of dig deeper into that story and really get a feel for it. That, in my opinion, that's one of the best interviews, when you can have that kind of discussion and really get through a complicated situation with somebody and get a feel for how they think about work and approach things. Then you're in great shape for making a good hire. So.
And you are in the midst of having a really remarkable career, and you've had quite extensive background, including Intel and being on the West Coast, and then in a very public company, and then now in a private company, and being the CHRO here and more on the East Coast. When you think kind of holistically about there, do you see particular trends that in the HR space that cut across kind of all of these really wide-ranging companies? Yeah.
The piece that I've been seeing, is something that we're working on at Milliken and worked on at my previous company, is really getting into and making use of analytics. And so I think about HR situations where maybe the HR team came in with more of a conceptual discussion on something and a little bit more maybe textbook, versus coming in with data and some benchmarking examples and telling that story, almost sort of setting the bar. In a perfect world, HR could come in with data and benchmarking at the same level you'd expect from a business manager or a CFO. And if you could achieve something close to that level, that would be fabulous. And so for us, we're actually investing in analytics and that storytelling piece of it, and doing much deeper data analysis and data visualization and overlaying stories from other companies and things like that to help move us through. So I think from our standpoint, that's the biggest sort of trend and shift that we're seeing. And I think that the more an HR team can harness that ability and build it up in its group, and having the storytelling ability to get that data out there, the more impactful they'll be. Because I think they're more likely to sort of speak the language of the business partners and the finance folks and be able to connect with them. So I think if I was giving advice to an HR team somewhere, that's one skill I would really invest in, is building that up from an analytics standpoint, and not just having an analytics specialist, but you can develop some of those skills in everybody in the team to some degree and have them thinking and working in a data-driven way. So. Can
you just highlight a little bit more about why having that analytics is important? I mean, you talked about speaking the language, and but why? How is it? Why is it that it's so important right now that that's really kind of a driving trend to both have the skills to do the analytics, as well as the ability to interpret it and tell that story and explain it?
Again, I've seen HR folks come in with more conceptual things and just kind of more like we know that if we do this, it'll be good for our people and they'll like it and things like that. And so they kind of tell a story that intuitively makes sense, but it's not going to necessarily capture the intensity and commitment of a business leader who's much more data-driven. So I think there's a fundamental it's fundamentally helps you influence where things are going. We did a project recently where if you think about if you go to the doctor and you go for your annual physical and they do all the vital signs on you and kind of measure all your indicators of health, we're trying to apply that same concept to the overall workforce. And so there are potentially trends and things that are happening in the workforce and evolutions that are happening that you may not notice day to day, but over time they could become really impactful to your business. Like an age curve, for example. If your workforce is much older than what the typical workforce demographic would be, you're going to have some knowledge transfer challenges down the road. And so for us, we just recently did a complete sort of diagnostic on our workforce, everything from our hiring success, early retention, org health, diversity, age curve, everything, and put all of those indicators together on a map to say where are we really at and what's happening with our workforce. And then we shared that with our different business leaders. And we got a number of comments of, I've never seen anything like this from HR before. This really makes sense. We like the data. And that more, just like if you're delivering a financial analysis, you're delivering something at that same sort of quality and specificity. I think that really connects with business leaders, and it just helps you speak their language and connect with them and be more influential. So, we're early in our journey, but I think we're already starting to see some value of that, and we're picking up on some trends in areas that would have gotten by us until they became very painful problems that we had to react to. So.
Once again, thank you very much for joining us. This is truly a treat and an honor for us to have you here. So thank you, and we hope you'll come back again.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We definitely will. Thank you so much.
Thanks. You just listened to another CHRO Conversation. Today, Craig Haydamack of Milliken and Company shared his views regarding some of the unique challenges that exist for human resources and his expectations for how HR can drive business. As we see once again, HR leaders must be creative, courageous, and understand the strategic goals of the organization to be most effective. On behalf of all of us who are associated with the Master of Human Resource program and the Center for Executive Succession here at the University of South Carolina, thank you for joining us.